They say the truth always comes out, a nice thought. But sometimes the truth gets buried so deep under so much rubble and so many lies that you need a stick of dynamite to get it out. If you wanted to make sure conspiracy theories would thrive for a generation, you wouldn't have to make one up. You'd just have to act guilty as hell. You'd suppress the video evidence. You'd ship the crime scene overseas before anyone could examine it. You'd call anyone who asked a simple question a criminal or a lunatic. And then you'd use the whole damn tragedy to start a war that had nothing to do with what happened. I ain't talking about the planes. Everyone saw the planes. They made sure you saw them over and over again until it was burned into your memory. I'm talking about the building they hoped you'd forget. A 47-story skyscraper that fell at freefall speed without being hit by anything. World Trade Center 7. Ever heard of it? Yeah, neither did most Americans. And that wasn't by accident. That was by design. That was evidence suppression on a national scale. Let's get the facts straight, because the facts are all that matter in a real investigation. Building 7 wasn't hit by a plane. It wasn't even grazed. It stood a full football field away from the North Tower, with another building, the Verizon building, standing in between. That building got damaged, but it didn't collapse. Building 7 suffered some minor damage, some office fires on a few floors, but at 5:20 p.m., a full 7 hours after the towers fell, Building 7 came down. And it didn't just fall. It came down clean, symmetrically, straight into its own footprint, like it was wired for demolition by a team of experts. Folks, don't take my word for it. Don't believe me. Go read the official 9/11 Commission report. The book they told you was the final word, the Bible of what happened. 577 pages of narrative, and you know how many times they mention the collapse of WTC 7? 0. Not once. A footnote, maybe, but no explanation. That building, a 47-story steel fortress taller than any building in 34 states, got wiped from the history books like a typo. That ain't an omission, pal. That's intent. That's a cover-up. So what was inside this building they so conveniently forgot to mention? Just a few file cabinets? Some dusty old offices? No. Let's look at the tenant list. It reads like a who's who of the deep state. The CIA. A top-secret clandestine station on the 25th floor, their New York headquarters. The Department of Defense, the Secret Service, their largest field office in the country, with all the files on financial crimes, counterfeiting, and threats against the president. And, in a twist of irony so thick you could choke on it, the NYC Office of Emergency Management, Mayor Giuliani's emergency command bunker. The very place they were supposed to run the response to a major terrorist attack from, their headquarters inside a building that wasn't supposed to fall. What kind of coincidence is that? You think all that intel, all those sensitive records, all those ongoing investigations into Wall Street fraud, all the files on foreign assets just conveniently burned up in a few scattered office fires? You think all those security systems, all that classified data just failed simultaneously? Or are you starting to get the picture? When a bank gets robbed, you don't burn down the bank to hide the evidence, unless you were the one robbing it. Go watch the footage. Don't just glance at it. Watch it, frame by frame. You'll see the structure disintegrate before it even hits the ground. It turns to dust in midair. The entire building, 250,000 tons of steel and concrete, just vanishes into a pyroclastic cloud of debris. Steel doesn't vaporize. Concrete doesn't pulverize into fine powder. Not from office fires. Not from a building next door falling. Gravity makes things fall. It doesn't make them explode into dust. So where's the rubble? Where are the 47 stories of steel beams and concrete floors? Gone. Hauled away. So fast it would make your head spin. Before any real forensic investigation could take place. Before any independent structural engineers could ask the hard questions. The New York Times even reported that the steel was shipped to Asia to be melted down and recycled without ever being examined. That's the crime scene, the murder weapon, and they sent it to China. The evidence wasn't just compromised, it was erased, just like the story of the building itself. In the weeks after 9/11, cleanup crews found pools of molten metal under the rubble of all 3 towers, including Building 7. Rivers of what looked like melted steel, glowing red hot for weeks. There's only one problem with that. No fire in that building. Not a single office fire in the history of the world has ever burned hot enough to melt steel. Not even close. Jet fuel can't do it. It burns too cool. Office furniture can't do it. The government's own report, the NIST report, even admits the fires weren't hot enough. It was a problem they couldn't ignore. So they came up with a new story, a fairy tale for engineers. Thermal expansion, they called it. A fantasy. They said a single girder on a single floor got hot, expanded, and shifted 6.25 inches. And that this one tiny event caused a progressive collapse of the entire 47-story steel structure. One girder, 6 inches, and 47 stories came down like a Las Vegas casino implosion? Give me a break. I've heard better lies from a 2-bit punk in an interrogation room with a busted lip. Let me ask you something. Let's look at the history books, the precedents. In 1991, a massive fire burned for 18 hours across 8 floors of the Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia. A raging inferno. The building was heavily damaged, but it didn't collapse. In 1988, the First Interstate Bank Tower in Los Angeles had a fire that burned for hours, gutting multiple floors. It still stood, a blackened skeleton. In 2017, the Grenfell Tower in London burned for 24 hours straight. A horrific tragedy. It never came down. And yet, we're supposed to believe that Building 7, a modern steel-frame skyscraper, burned for just 7 hours with scattered office fires and then fell perfectly into its own footprint at the speed of gravity, something that had never happened before or since due to fire alone? Come on. You don't have to be an engineer to know a con when you see one. There's a name for what we saw that day. A name they don't want you to say. Controlled demolition. Don't just take my word for it. Professor Leroy Halsey at the University of Alaska, a man with nothing to gain and everything to lose, ran a full, multi-year, computer-modeled study on this. His conclusion? Office fires could not have caused the collapse. He said the NIST explanation is scientifically impossible. Impossible. That's a strong word for a scientist. And it gets worse. Independent scientists tested the dust that covered Lower Manhattan. Dust from all 3 buildings. And what'd they find? Traces of highly energetic thermetic material. A compound used in military-grade incendiaries and demolitions. The kind of stuff that can cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. But did NIST, our official government investigation, test for thermite? No. They didn't test for any explosive residue at all. You know why? They didn't want to know. They weren't looking for the truth. They were building a story, and they didn't want any facts getting in the way. A city official named Barry Jennings, a man who worked in that emergency command center, went public. He was inside the building that morning. He said he heard explosions inside the building before the Twin Towers had even collapsed. He described being trapped, the lobby destroyed around him, and dead bodies in the stairwell. His timeline, his eyewitness account, completely contradicted the official story. He was a credible witness with a city title. A problem. But 2 days before the official NIST report on Building 7 was finally released, years later, Barry Jennings died. Age 53. Suddenly. No public investigation, no explanation. His family was told not to talk about it. Just another coincidence, right? In my line of work, we call that silencing a witness. Let's talk about motive. Follow the money. In the days leading up to 9/11, somebody, somewhere, knew what was coming. They placed millions of dollars in put options, bets that the stock of certain companies would crash. And which companies did they bet against? United Airlines, American Airlines, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch. All companies with offices in the towers. All targeted, all hit. The trading volume on these puts was hundreds of times the normal average. It was a statistical impossibility. Who made those trades? The 9/11 Commission report, in a tiny footnote, admits that 95% of the United Airlines puts were traced to a single U.S. institutional investor, one entity. But the government won't release the name. They're still hiding it. The FBI said the trades were innocuous. Innocuous? Making millions off the deaths of 3,000 people is innocuous? You believe that? Our own government might have been blind, but foreign agencies knew something. France warned of hijack plots involving U.S. airlines as early as January 2001. Germany knew the hijackers were on the move. They were living there. And then there's Israel. They had operatives in New Jersey with a camera pointed at the towers before the first plane hit. And they were seen celebrating when the buildings fell. Yes, celebrating. Meanwhile, back home, the CIA knew hijackers were in the country. The NSA had the signals intelligence, the phone calls. But they didn't share it. Not even with our own FBI. What kind of operation runs like that? What kind of intelligence failure is that complete? It's the kind of failure that looks a lot like an operation that didn't want to stop the attack. It wanted to let it happen. And the Israeli connection gets deeper. There was a massive ring of Israeli art students operating in the U.S. in the year leading up to the attacks. The DEA and the FBI ran a huge investigation into them. They weren't students. They were intelligence assets. And where were they based? Hollywood, Florida, and northern New Jersey. The exact same cities as the hijackers. An FBI document declassified years later admits it. One internal memo said it is difficult to believe they weren't tracking the future hijackers. You starting to get it? This wasn't a failure of intelligence. This wasn't just incompetence. This was a setup. A story was written before the first plane ever took off. And the cleanup job afterward was damn near perfect. Until people like us started asking questions. You can talk about planes all day long. You can talk about bin Laden in a cave in Afghanistan. You can argue about every other detail. But Building 7 breaks the whole official story wide open. It's the loose thread. No plane, no significant impact, no historical precedent, just a mysterious, symmetrical freefall collapse that even the government, in its own 577-page report, refused to explain. That's the crack in the armor. That's the piece of evidence that doesn't fit. You pull that thread, the whole damn suit comes apart. The CIA's secret office, the foreign intel warnings, the media complicity, the NSA's silence, all of it. It all unravels. So you're left with a list of questions that any rookie detective would have asked on day one. Why did they ship the rubble overseas before it was analyzed? Why were no pictures or videos ever released of bin Laden's body after the raid? Why did the BBC report Building 7's collapse 20 minutes before it happened, with the building still standing in the shot behind the reporter? Why were paper passports found intact at Ground Zero when steel beams were turned to ash and concrete was pulverized? And the biggest question of all, cui bono? Who profited? Who got a war they'd been wanting for years? Why weren't these basic, fundamental questions in the 9/11 Commission report? You know why. Because they weren't looking for answers. They were just selling you a story. There's a reason they don't want you asking about Tower 7. Because if you ask about that one, you start asking about all of it. And you start to realize the crime wasn't just what happened on that day. The crime is the lie they've been telling ever since. The bodies weren't the only things buried that day. So was the truth. But it's starting to claw its way out. And once it does, a whole lot of people are going to have to answer for what really happened. And I, for one, would love to be in the room when they do. Thanks to Chris Dallas for another spectacular script for me to present to you. Nobody tells it better than Chris and Celebrity Recreations. So please do the right thing and share this with everyone you know. Then hit that like button and tell us your thoughts in the comments. And if you like what you just heard, it's all true, not one lie, then subscribe to the channel and let us beat the YouTube algorithms that are preventing our growth. Why? Because they don't like the truth. That's why. Until next time, this is Dirty Harry wishing you all a wonderful rest of the year, 2025. Dirty Harry, out.